Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Juicy Conversations with Julie. Today, I'm back with a very interesting, very pressing topic, which is the topic of vaccine safety. If you've been living under a rock, we've been in a pandemic for now almost a year, I'd say. Yeah, it's been a year. The COVID-19 pandemic, and what seems to be the savior of this pandemic is the vaccine, which took approximately a year to develop as well. But unfortunately, a lot of people, now that the vaccine is here, are having many doubts about it. A lot of people don't trust science, don't trust scientists, don't trust pharmaceuticals. So today I brought two guests with me who have answers to pretty much all of your questions. And we'll be debunking kind of the misconceptions about vaccines. We'll be going through the conspiracy theories. So on to my guests now. Do you want to quickly introduce yourselves for everyone?
Yes. So I'm Véronique Imbriquet-Logier. I've got a PhD in biophysics some years ago, and I've been very experienced in biotech and biology science, working on rare diseases for almost 17 years, and now I'm working on huge programs for Europe and international, and I've been posted in India, in South Africa, working on those really cross the world projects.
Very cool. And I'm Eloise. You may have met me in the first episode. I studied science in university, specifically engineering and manufacturing of biotechs and pharmaceutical products. I did an internship in a rare disease and cell therapy lab in a hospital in Paris for 3 months, and now I work in the pharmaceutical industry.
In UK.
In the UK, yes.
So let's get into it. First of all, before anything, I just want to come back to one basic principle, which is, how does a vaccine work? Not necessarily just the COVID vaccine, but in general, what is the technology behind a vaccine? And why is it so important that people get vaccinated?
Eloise, you can start with the technology. Go ahead.
So there's different technologies, I think about 4 or 5 in vaccine, but they all follow the same principle, that a vaccine's aim is to trigger an immune response, so that once you do actually come in contact with a virus or a bacteria, another disease, your body knows how to react to it and will be able to have an immune response that is fast and effective. And you might get a tiny bit sick, you might not at all, but it's just teaching your body how to combat that specific virus. I think that's the basic.
Yeah, we are in France. This podcast is happening in France, as you can hear with my accent. And we have the pastor. Pastor was the first to really think about this vaccination. And how he did that, he did that with rabies. And he found that if he deactivated the rabies and cut it into pieces, he could trigger the immune response into this young boy. It was a 12 or 13-year-old boy who was vaccinated at that time. He could trigger the immune response without having the disease. And it was the big revolution. So since, I would say, 150 years, we know how vaccination works, and we have vaccination.
Okay. I think for the COVID vaccine, I've read quite a bit about it. I won't lie, I don't get all of it. I just don't understand all of it. I'm just someone who trusts science and vaccines. Am I right in thinking that there's 2 technologies behind the vaccines?
Yeah, so it depends on which vaccine you're talking about. But for the 2 main ones that have been approved, so the Pfizer, BioNTech, and Moderna one, it's not even actually a small fragment of the vaccine. It's basically, so before going back, you kind of need to understand how a virus is shaped. You need to imagine this little ball that has all the virus bad stuff in it, and on the surface of this ball there are spikes, and these spikes is what connects to our cells, and that's how the virus enters our cells and begins to be destructive and can have bad effects. So the two Moderna and Pfizer vaccines actually just have the proteins that code for these spikes to attach to our cells. That means that it doesn't have any viral fragments, anything that's actually part of the COVID virus. It's just so when a virus connects to our cells and the virus goes into our cells, it needs to be translated so that our cells can read this virus. And this is translated through proteins. And so these vaccines only have these proteins that allow our cells to read the viral fragments. So there's no viral components per se in these vaccines, which I think should be kind of something that makes you more comfortable about the vaccine. It's not the case for all vaccines. Some vaccines have viral components, but the two COVID ones don't.
Yeah, those two don't, but the AstraZeneca, for example, has. So there are several technologies. The AstraZeneca is taking the, I would say, the old, so to speak, approach, that is to take pieces of the virus that are totally inactive and to inject that to you, and it's a very safe vaccine. It has been, the AstraZeneca is very safe. It has been really well monitored in several countries, Brazil, South Africa, and UK. So it's complementary. What is great in these two vaccines, it's this revolution and this safetiness about it, and I think it's why Europe, for example, really wanted those vaccines. So it's not a problem at all. So both technologies are really great.
And even for the AstraZeneca one, it's, if I'm correct, fragments of the viral protein of the virus, but it's not the whole virus that they're putting into the vaccine. We're not injecting the virus into you. We're injecting only segments of the viral genetic code.
Yes.
And
that are
deactivated so that they're not as dangerous as the virus, and that they can only serve to trigger an immune response without actually making you sick like the virus would.
So that's important. Yeah, that's important also when we talk about immune response. It's the capacity our body has to recognize after the bad element, and it's like to plan in advance that you're going to have enemies that are going to invade you, and that you are ready with all the weapons to shut down the enemies. And this is what our immune system is about. Throughout all our entire lifespan, we've seen so many of those, bacteria and warriors that tried to attack us. And each time we really designed ourselves, our body designed weapons to kill them and to get rid of them. And this is what immunity is about. So this is why when people are trying to say that it's going to get into our genes, it's going to get into our cells, it's going to get in our brain, it is not possible. First of all, nothing can get in our brain because we have a specific filter between our brain and our blood system, so there is no possibilities, but also because it's only outside little warriors that we are going to fight. So there is no way of being afraid of a vaccination, from any vaccination.
Okay, that's rich. And I think the point about what is injected in you being deactivated is also really important, and that's something that people miss. I think it's totally normal when you think of the pandemic has been super scary, first and foremost in itself. When you think about it, everything about it has provided so much anxiety and so much fear amongst people. And when you tell them, okay, we've got this vaccine, we've been working on it for a year, a bit over a year, under a year, whatever. And then you hear that they're basically going to inject the same disease that has been killed, the same virus that has been killing so many people around the world. I think the reaction of saying, well, I don't want that is totally normal. But this is when you need to either research what vaccination is really about, because when you look into it, you do realize that actually the technology is not as risky and as insecure as one might think, or listen to people, talk to people that have those answers. I remember understanding nothing about the virus and about vaccination. And so I've called you, Eloise, so many times because I was like, okay, well, what does this mean? And this has gone out in the news. Can you explain it to me? And I think that's really what's important, is talking to people who actually have knowledge about it, because we, the general public, a lot of times don't. And I wanted to come back on 2 points. So one, now that we've explained all that, I've heard so many people even close to me say, well, I don't think I'm going to get vaccinated because I don't need to, because COVID is not putting me at any risk. But also, even if we were all asymptomatic, why is it so important that we still, the youth, or anybody that doesn't suffer from COVID, that we do still get the vaccine?
So first of all, I would like to make a precision that a lot of medical doctors have confided to me that please don't get the COVID, because it is so specific to every human being that we don't know for how long and in how many years you're going to have some consequences of the COVID. And my friends that are in hospitals every day told me that they see things that are not rational for them, but of course the human being, we are all different. We are all different human beings facing a disease. So that's very important to begin with, to do not catch COVID, because we don't have the step back to understand what's going to happen. Maybe in 20 years from now, because you had COVID, you're going to have, a pancreatitis or whatever, I don't know. But just this is the first thing why we should not we should be vaccinated. But maybe Louise, you want to add something about that?
Yeah, I mean, also something that's important to keep in mind, I think, is that viruses are very smart organisms, and they have the capability of gaining strength and potency with their number of replications, right? So if more people get this disease, that gives more power and deadliness to this virus. So sure, herd immunity can be an option. Herd immunity is having as many people immune against one virus, but it also gives a lot of strength to that virus. So that means that in order to reach such immunity, you're going to have so many deaths, so many sickness. And as Vero said, we don't know the long-term consequences. This is still, yes, it's 1 year old, but diseases are usually 50, 100, more than 100 years old. So we don't know the long-term consequences. So going back to your point, it's important to want everyone to get vaccinated, because if there's all these young people or not young who say, oh, I don't need it, I'm not going to get sick, it's just increasing the time lapse before we actually reach this herd immunity. It's just going to make us stay in a state of pandemic and uncertainty for a really long time, when it's just such a simple option.
Yeah, and also it's a very selfish attitude to say, okay, I'm not going to be very sick, and so I can get it. But you can transmit it to people at the supermarket, everywhere. You can transmit it. So it's also a very good attitude to say that, okay, I'm going to have the vaccination to protect also my family, to protect my friends, to protect everyone around me. And when we think about, for example, variole, how do you say that in English? Measles, maybe. Measles has been totally eradicated from the planet thanks to vaccination. And it has to reach at least 70 to 80% of the population vaccinated to reach this eradication. So it's very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, it's not it's an individual choice, but you need to think of it as a collective. Vaccination on its own doesn't work. It's maybe going to help you, but it's still going to, if you're the only one getting vaccinated and no one else around you does, the disease is still going to be so prevalent that it's not going to change anything to your life and how society can function. So you really need to think of vaccination as a collective duty, whether that's for a community, a nation, worldly, internationally. It can only work if everyone as a collective vaccinates themselves individually, so to benefit the whole community. Right. Mm-hmm. You don't want a natural herd immunity. If we take the example of AIDS, you wouldn't expect 2/3 or 3/4 of the world population to get AIDS so that we achieve herd immunity.
It's the same thing with COVID.
Mm. Exactly.
So you
can't get it naturally, which is where vaccines jump in. And I think what's interesting, what you said about the duty, is it's actually a sociological concept, which is the concept of social contract, where yes, we're all individuals, and yes, we can and should, to a certain extent, think about our well-being and of our success and of our flourishing. But we all live in a society. We all have to share a lot of things. Those can be easy things like public transport and streets, but also a lot of things like the judicial system and political leaders. There are a lot of decisions that impact every person in the world as much as they impact us. And that's what I think is important. And that's where I totally agree. Yes, vaccination is a right. And we could say that about many other things. Like, for example, voting is also technically a right, but it is also a duty, because your individual decision and action is going to have an impact on your small community, on towns, on cities, countries, and internationally. And I think that's what people need to understand, is you might think that getting the vaccine will not change anything for you. And to be fair, maybe in some rare cases, it could be the case, but realistically, we're not going to get rid of this virus if everyone doesn't go. And so it is as much for others as it is for you, that it is your duty and your responsibility to go to get that vaccine. And I think that's what is really, really important that we make a point of in this podcast, because so many people don't seem to understand how much their personal decision or their individual opinion impacts the rest of us.
There's another thing I'd like to add, is that there are a lot of people who cannot get vaccinated because they're not healthy enough, or they have a certain disability that can't allow them to get vaccinated. And so those people rely on collective vaccination because that's the only way that they can be safe. So again, it goes in with a collective duty, is that if you are healthy and you can take a vaccine, you need to do it for those who can't, and that would be destructive for them to get a vaccine. So they need to rely on this wider effort.
I think, it's just important, because that's just how society is structured. We just have a lot of things that depend on each other, whether we like it or not is a different issue. But it all comes down, and this is a word that I'll probably use a lot in these podcasts, to privilege. It's you have the privilege not only of being able of having a vaccine, but of being able to get vaccinated. You have the privilege of thinking that whether you get vaccinated or not is not really going to alter your life, at least physically. It's not going to alter your body. Use that privilege, and instead of thinking selfishly and thinking, well, I don't need it, so I don't care. Use that privilege and think, well, I'm in a situation where vaccination is not really going to affect me, but it's going to affect so many people that don't have that same privilege as me. So why don't I use my privilege to help others that don't have as much? I think that's what's important. And that's what always
100%.
always gets me is
Yes.
we need to check our privileges, yes, but we also need to use it to help others. That's what we need to do.
Yeah. I agree.
Moving on from this, another thing that I've seen a lot of is people talking about the timings. So a lot of people are saying they don't trust the vaccine because it was developed too quickly. But personally, I have no idea how much time it should take to develop a vaccine. And I feel like a lot of these people that have this same narrative, most of us don't know. We were never taught or told how much time it should take. So can you add a little bit on that? Do you think it is a valid argument to claim that it's been developed too quick and therefore isn't safe?
Well, first of all, we've had a lot of experience, like I said, since Pasteur, the end of the 19th century, and guys, we are the 21st century. So we have a lot of experience how a vaccine can be made. So we have a lot of experience of the safetiness, and that's important. This is safety before all, you know. Of course, it has to be efficient, but to really do not harm people. And like I like to say, to tell that story, that when we were kids in the 70s, we were vaccinated almost every other year because the vaccines were not very efficient at that time, and they became more and more efficient. And I remember by the time I was a teenager, I had those vaccinations only every 10 years, whereas when I was little, it was every year. So first of all, that all this knowledge had been accumulated, and it's a privilege. There is a time, of course, between research and commercialization of something, you know, of a product. And so the scientists in the pharmaceutical companies are going to research, to build up, and after they are going to put it on the market. And when you have time, it's okay. You can take your time, and it's going to be less expensive if you take your time. If you don't have time, it's going to be very expensive, and this is what happened for the last year. You're going to put all effort, and like you said, globally, everyone was on that. So everyone who failed also gave some insights to the one who succeeded, of course, because they have this open data, open science platform. So that also explained. And I would just, before giving the floor to Eloise, I would just like to add that we have organizations in Europe, in USA, everywhere, that are giving the right to market, and that are giving the green light to be sold to be not sold, but to be given on the market from pharmaceuticals. And those are very, very stringent. They are very authoritarian, and they are very stringent. So we have to trust them, and we trusted them until now. So why don't we trust them now in the COVID time?
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. I wanted to add on the validation process. Mm-hmm. It is incredibly rigorous and robust, and in Europe specifically, there's a European agency, which then trickles down to the national agencies. So vaccine that is commercialized or validated for use in France has been validated twice by a huge amount of data, and that has been separated into 3 phases. So yes, it has been going really fast this last year, but it still follows the same process that all other vaccines, all other pharmaceutical products follow. That is these 3 phase clinical trials. Mm-hmm. And then, by the way, there's a 4th clinical trial phase, which is the ongoing one, so that in the 10-20 years post-validation, a vaccine or a product is still being monitored just to check if side effects are still in line with what they were with the first clinical trials. So like, it's not as if it's signed off and then no one checks if it's okay. It's still being highly monitored.
Yes.
So that's one point. Another point for coronavirus specifically, this is the second coronavirus, right? There was SARS-CoV-1. So there was still a bit of research that had been done that kind of give a head start for all the research that was to be done for SARS-CoV-2, the current coronavirus. So that allowed scientists and development to go a bit faster and have a head start. And then second, just in the, or third, in the history of pandemics or big stressful disease problems, you need to think of how much innovation and development there has been. The last time I remember being there being a stressful time was when I was like 10 or a bit before 10. That was 10 years ago. Can you imagine how much development and innovation goes on in 10 years? The Americans and Russians sent people to the moon and to space in the span of 10 years. Like, a lot happens in 10 years that allows scientists and any institution involved in the development of a pharmaceutical product or a vaccine to really take advantage of all these new innovations, all this new development. It's not as if everything happened in once in 2020. Yeah. There had been a lot of progress made before that allowed this development to go so fast in 1 year. And it's an effort that we've never seen before. Like, there's never been a point of time where so much money, resources, so much collaboration has happened. So sure, it has taken less time than maybe more traditional validation routes usually do, but it's because there's never been a point in time in history of science where there's been so much collaboration, so many resources put together at once with the same aim and objective 1 year.
And the amount of money that all the governments put on the table to trigger this development. And I really, Héloïse is right. This phase 4, which is after the phase 3, this phase 4 is very important. It's an ongoing monitor, and it has been, implemented years ago, because some of the medication that we're putting on the market showed some problems. So they implemented this phase 4, which means that for our own sake, the European market, in Europe, we are all protected by this phase 4. And if there is a red light, puff, red flag, and we stop. So, and we go back to the medication, and we withdraw the medication from the market. So this phase 4 is very important. And
I think with regards to everything you said, one key point is money that government put in. I think, and that's a totally separate podcast, but it's undeniable that people have a lot of trust issues when it comes to governments and when it comes to politics. And what's happened because of the collaboration between governments and pharmaceuticals is that people think that this distrust and dishonesty that we can see in politics is the same in pharmaceuticals. When they're still two different sectors, they collaborate. But I think that's something I've seen growing up, is people don't trust because they think that it's issues of money and that it's issues of profits and issues of people wanting careers. And they forget that at the end of the day, first of all, whatever your motive is, the goal is to put out medication that works and that is safe, because that's a waste of money. You're putting your reputation on the line. You're putting resources on the line. So you have a lot to lose if you put just anything on the market. And also, a lot of the people that get into these sectors is because they are interested and passionate about what they're going to develop. So these are not people who are necessarily looking for financial gratification and for press and for attention. These are people that do it because they genuinely like that sector. And so what people need to maybe get out of their heads is that the pharma sector is completely corrupt and money driven. And I think that just because of the amount of money that is available in the pharmaceutical sector, people just assume that that's why people are in it. And I think that is a misconception. And that could be where a lot of the doubts come from. Also that leads to my next question. Well, two of my next questions. One is, so I was reading an article, which I told you guys about, that was saying that in this sector, there's a very big difference between there being zero risk of anything and something being risky. And they gave examples, and it was just like, if you look at those, like if you look at chemo, for example, the side effects, there's just so many. I mean, I couldn't even state them all because there's so many. And there's some that are pretty serious. But at the end of the day, chemo can cure cancer. So the benefits are bigger than the side effects. And so we go on with this process. And I think for the COVID vaccine, it's the same thing, because so many people are afraid of the side effects that might come. And I think that's a point that you can maybe go into, is that zero risk, I'm pretty sure, doesn't exist when we're talking about science and medicine, but it doesn't mean that something isn't safe just because it's not 100% safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's never zero risk because everyone is different, and you can never know how every single body on Earth is going to react to one standardized product. But it's true, every single pharmaceutical company or health entity has the name differs, but usually it's called a health outcome team that evaluates the benefits of taking a medicine or a product short-term and long-term versus the potential risks. Any product that has been commercialized, put on the market, promoted by ministers, any product that goes through, well, all the products, since they all go through the clinical trials and validation processes, this risk versus benefit is always evaluated. If there is a single decision-making point, it's this risk versus benefit. So there might be huge benefits, but if it's too risky, it won't ever be validated by the European Commission, European Medicines Agency, or the French Medicines Agency. Same for the US, same for everywhere. We always look at risk versus benefit. And for vaccines specifically, the risks on a national and global level are just so low. There is always going to be some risks because, as I said, there's some bodies that might not react to the vaccine, that might have an allergic reaction, and someone might have underlying circumstances that make this allergic reaction potentially dangerous. Unfortunately, you can't make products that are tailored to everyone's bodies. That's just not feasible. So you need to take into account these risks. But again, it's for a national, international collective, and the benefits just completely outweigh the risks.
So I like this idea of risk zero, because years ago I've worked a lot on that. After the mad cow problem. So I've researched that. We are and I think it's going to be an entire podcast about that. We are in a very bizarre society. Now we want risk zero. We want to take no risk. And in France, we have what we call the principe de précaution, precaution principle, which doesn't really exist in the US or in the UK, but it's something that we are going to stop doing things because we are afraid and we want this zero risk, and so we evolved towards that. But I mean, this is not possible to have zero risk. Tomorrow you're going to cross the street and the bus is going to run over you. It's just like,
There's always risks.
There is always risks in life. And, like I say, life is a sexually transmissible disease, and we're going to die of life, So there is no way out. So anyway, just to make it very short and I think very important, is that there is always a risk. The pharmaceutical companies, the agencies, all that, they are protecting us from these risks. So the risk is as low as possible. Again, vaccination has been around for almost 2 centuries, and we know, we are afraid of the excipients we are going to put in, but we know they are monitored, we know that it's safe. And we know that all the vaccines that are on the market, at least the one I know, AstraZeneca, Moderna, Pfizer, they are safe. They've been proved safe. So this is what is important. But yes, you know what? There is no zero risk in life. Yeah. Life is a risk.
Yeah. So there are going to be side effects potentially. And I feel like nobody ever said, whether it's the companies or the governments, that there were going to be no side effects for no one and that the virus was just going to disappear one day. But what it's important to know is it's not because there are side effects that the vaccine is bad.
Yeah. Well, for example, I was vaccinated against the flu this year, and I don't know, a couple of years ago, I was also vaccinated. This year I had nothing, no fever, nothing. 2 years ago, I was not feeling good for 2 days, and I was a little feverish, and myself, I reacted twice differently. So this is a side effect. I have a little fever, but I didn't have the flu, and I was vaccinated. So it's so that, there is no way of predicting if usually you're going to have a side effect with the vaccine and which vaccine you're going to. We cannot predict, but at the same time, we know that those vaccines are safe.
Okay. Yeah. That's it. Because I think the point of this podcast, for me at least, I don't want to push any ideas on anyone. I don't want to convince you or convert you, but it's just, to me, if everyone could get the vaccine, that would just be great. But the point is, having doubts is normal, and we're going to go quickly into some of the conspiracy theories around the vaccine. Having doubts is normal, and questioning the information you're receiving is human and normal, and it is a good thing. But I think what's important is, before you make such an important decision for yourself and for the rest of the planet, pretty much, it's important to make sure that you have the right information and that you are just informed, full stop, before even that you have looked at the data and that you have looked into the processes and into vaccine safety and into everything before you decide, yes, I'm going to get vaccinated, or no, I'm not. And after this podcast, if you decide, well, I still don't want to, that's fine. But at least making sure to check sources and to really understand the information that is being presented to us before forming an opinion on that information. And that links directly into all the conspiracy theories we've seen. I have a very, very weird relationship with conspiracy theories. I sometimes understand them. There's some that I don't understand, like flat earthers, people who believe in like the Illuminati and selling your soul to the devil. That I don't really get, but I understand how people can not trust the information that is presented to them. And because a lot of the agencies, whether it's governments, the media, businesses, a lot of these agencies that have given us information over the years and over the decades have a lot of times disappointed us and given us fake information. So it's completely normal to have doubts. But what I find interesting with conspiracy theories is a lot of the time the process of the conclusion that they reach is completely flawed. So for example, the biggest conspiracy theory right now is that they're going to inject, is it 5G? I don't even understand it. 5G into our bodies so that the governments can track us. In my opinion, it's just a battle we've already lost. I think anyone can be found today, but yeah, I don't know. It's just, I don't even want to go into why that's not true for like 20 minutes, because I don't want to spend too much time trying to prove to people that there's no 5G in the vaccine. But what do you have to say to people that have no trust in governments and pharmaceuticals and are so intimately convinced that either there's 5G? I've heard theories that pharmaceuticals have put particles, that's the word I was looking for, AIDS or HIV particles in the vaccine, because either that was the only way to make it efficient, or there's also the theory that this whole thing is just to kill humans. It's just to get rid of humanity.
Yeah, unfortunately, I would say that about the conspiracy theories at large, unfortunately, there are scientists that fell for those, and that also harmed a lot both science at large, but also the population. So, of course, when you see a trustable scientist that had been awarded of a Nobel or whatever, telling things that are totally wrong, it's scary. And we're getting to the point, Julie, of your podcast of communication. We don't communicate enough as scientists, and we don't raise ourselves enough against those bad scientists. Poor scientists that are, falling for those conspiracy theories. I understand that people are worried because look what happened. We've been locked down. We've had so many stress upon us that we feel that the government wants to manipulate me, wants to say, look guys, governments are not that smart.
Yeah.
No, but that's the point.
It's true.
That's the point. Governments are far from being smart. They react. They don't plan. They don't think. They react. And they do what they can. So if you think about being tracked, think about your phone. You're tracked. You're just like your phone. Everyone knows what you're doing and when you're doing it.
What you like.
Please, they don't have to invent expensive vaccination with chips in it to track you guys. So just forget about that scientifically. People are not going to bother to do that. And think, again, remind yourself that governments are not that smart.
Yeah. I think your point of they react is really good. Just think of how much in debt governments are putting themselves into. Right now, short term at least, they're not gaining anything from this pandemic or even this vaccine development. They're really not. They're just losing millions by the day.
Yeah, and losing voters also.
By the hour. So, yeah, I mean, I don't really see the link between 5G and vaccination. I don't even think 5G really works in France yet, or definitely. I don't think we have cracked down that. But yeah, I mean, the government doesn't have the resources, the time, the knowledge to make such a crazy plan to put 5G chips into your arm. They're not scientists. They're not technologists.
No.
They're politicians, even in the health ministry, even in the technology ministry. Yeah. They're politicians who have an agenda, a political agenda that is money related.
To be reelected.
Exactly. And that's all they can do. So they don't have the knowledge. They don't know.
And they don't have the time or the resources as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. And the conspiracy theory, the guys that are thinking about those conspiracy theory that are making them up, they have time. So they think too much. They have a lot of time. And they think that and that and that. But even some friends told me, oh, don't you think that the president said that because of that? And I said, oh, you think he's that smart? I don't think so.
He's just reacting.
I don't think. Yes, exactly. He's doing things like he can, And no, that's...
A proof of that is also how they've not negotiated vaccine prices and governments are paying ridiculous amounts because they don't know how much it costs to develop vaccine. They don't know all of this knowledge. And so I don't think, honestly, pharmaceutical companies are profiting that much from the vaccine development.
Yeah, but there was no negotiation.
Exactly. And that's to show.
And even if you look at the lockdowns, it's the same thing. That just shows how little knowledge they have about the science behind. And I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer. I would hate to be any world leader right now. So I'm not going to criticize what they've done. I think they've all tried, or at least in Europe, or Western Europe, they've tried to do what they thought was best, but it was constantly reactions. In France, we're not in a lockdown yet, but we kind of know that it might be coming because they're just waiting for the critical point to lock us up again. In the UK, because I live between France and the UK, so those are the two I know, they're going in and out of lockdowns every 3 months. And this is proof of a reaction. There's no anticipation. And I think what's funny, ironic, interesting is that a lot of the people that believe or create these conspiracy theories are persuaded that we who don't believe them, or we who choose to trust science and to trust the governments, are sheep. And the thing is, I speak for myself personally, I will get the vaccine as soon as I can. I do trust science. I do trust the medical world, but I don't necessarily trust governments. And I'm someone who does politics, who wants to work in politics, not in governmental politics, but that doesn't mean I trust, believe in, or agree with any of what our world leaders say, all of them in general, but also the ones that impact me the most, which are Boris Johnson and Emmanuel Macron. I don't necessarily like them either, but that's the thing, you really have to try and separate everything. And that's the issue with conspiracy theories, is they put so much together, and there are links between all these things, of course, but they put so much together and they think that they're talking about this one big entity, when to me, it just isn't. And it's not because you choose to get the vaccine that you're a sheep and that you just blindly trust or believe everything that Macron says. You can love Macron and not want to get the vaccine. You can hate him and decide to get it. Yeah. I think it's just a matter of critical thinking, of kind of questioning the information that is being presented to you, and think, again, it goes back to this cost-benefit analysis. Like, do governments really have that much to gain from implementing chips in us? Did China have that much to gain in really creating a coronavirus and then creating a world pandemic? Like, governments are also losers of this also. I think it's just a matter of taking a step back and being like, okay, I have all this information. What is plausible? What doesn't really make sense? And how far am I going to doubt, and am I going to question all these institutions that are feeding me all this information?
And also, I think it's about recognizing and trusting who the real experts are. Yeah. And any conversation. Right now it's scientists because we're talking about vaccine, but it can be about scientists and the state of the environment and climate change. Any conversation, you need to be able to kind of spot who the real experts are. And exactly. It's not the people in government, it's the actual scientists developing the vaccines in labs and in manufactories. Mm-hmm. And then it's about being able to trust these people who have dedicated their entire lives, research, careers, years of study to not only science, but to specifically viruses, and specifically viruses that come from, that resemble the coronavirus or whatever it may be. Like, you need, I think that's something that is maybe not, it can be a conversation for another day, but that's something that people kind of have a hard time to pinpoint who the real experts are. And I think that's how many conspiracy theories and distrust in like big corporations or government stems from, is that people can't really recognize who the real trustworthy sources are in a discussion.
Yeah, no, this is the problem also of all this communication, social media and internet. I love internet. I love all the social media because you can have a lot of information, but I'm lucky because I know how can I put it? I mean, I know how to sort out. And if I don't know how to sort out, I know the people that can help me out to sort out, because I'm not, this universal scientist. No, I don't know everything. But I'm curious, and I know that if you are persistent, you're going to find the right news. So even though we are at this wonderful era of social media and internet, we have to make the effort to go to the right information, to the right news, to avoid fake news. So
Yeah.
it's always the same.
Great. Well, do you have any last words, comments, anything that you want to add before we finish off?
Or just that life is a really complicated matter, and zero risk does not exist. And what matters also is to be in this collective, and to be this great blooming individual in this great society as a whole.
Yeah. I was thinking of something inspirational to say, but I can't really think of anything at that level. But
that's all right. Go ahead.
Yeah, just I think we all want to get our freedom back as soon as possible. And one way to do that is to trust the people who have dedicated their lives to researching and developing such crazy, innovative products that are vaccines and the COVID vaccine. So trust these people, get the vaccine once you're offered it, and hopefully we can all travel and go to restaurants and kiss and hug each other without masks very soon.
Yeah.
And as for me, I'd say continue to question the information that you're presented with always. Continue to ask yourself questions. Continue to not blindly follow whatever you're presented with. But when you have all these questions and all these doubts, make sure that you also try and get the answers and not just trust Twitter, not just trust Instagram, not just trust someone that pops up on your TV and claims to be a great person, but ask questions, read, reach out to people, make sure you get answers to all those doubts that you have before you make any form of decision, especially if that decision is going to impact every single human on this planet. But thank you guys so much for coming. I feel like I've learned so much and I've been preparing this podcast for 2 weeks.
Thank you, Julie.
Glad.
Thank you. It was very stimulating. Thank you, Eloise. It was very fun to share that with you guys.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to leave comments, to DM me with suggestions, questions, anything like that. You can follow me on all my social media, which will all be at Juicy Conversations. And if you have any topic ideas or any interventions that you'd like to make to this podcast, please do get in touch. I'm always looking for more conversations. So yeah, thank you, girls. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to anyone who listened, and I will see you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.